Test.
Okay, good. I will just be at the mic real quick. Okay. Sweet. Just do a couple announcements and then we'll get you done. Okay, got it. Sorry. Yeah, Good morning and welcome to B-Sides Las Vegas. Hope everyone's having a good third day. Welcome to Proving Ground. This is From Forest to Bonsai, pruning and explaining logs for air-gapped IoT devices using local LLM by Tetsuro Ishida. We'd like to thank our sponsors, especially our all-in sponsors, Vanta and Semgrep, and our double-down sponsors, Port, Swigger, and Panther. It's their support, along with other sponsors, donators, and volunteers that make this event possible. These talks are being streamed live on YouTube, and as a courtesy to our speakers, we ask that your phones are silent and that you refrain from taking photo or video during the presentation. With that, let's get started. Please welcome Tetsuro Ishida.
All right. Good morning, and thank you for coming to my presentation. My name is Tetsuro Ishida, and I am with Fujitsu Defense and National Security Limited. So today, I want to talk about narrow but practical questions. How do we detect the attacks on IoT devices? So the answer might be using EDR, endpoint detection response, or SIEM for detecting attacks. Well, that might help, but there's some cases that cannot be applied to those products. So we called it air-gapped environment. And then it also has a little CPU and memory resources in the air-gapped environment. So this presentation will explain how do we detect the attacks on air-gapped environment IoT devices. So here's this agenda. I'll explain background and then system overview. And after that, I'll show you a demo, and then I'll explain future questions. So before start the presentation, let me explain myself. I am Tetsuro Ishida, as I said, and I am doing security researcher at Fujitsu in Japan. And I'm mainly working on IoT and OT security things, like IoT device penetration testing and like that. And then here is my X, and then LinkedIn account. If you are interested in, you can follow me. So let's get back to the presentation. There's a lot of IoT devices in the world, such as smart cameras, smart meters, and so on. And by 2030, it is expected to be 39 billion devices around the world. IoT devices are mass-produced and in large quantity of the same model. Also, there are a variety of IoT devices. So their characteristic makes us harder to manage those devices because it has a variety of devices and like many tons of devices, and then less CPU resources. So what I want to say is like updating OS or like securing those devices are kind of hard things, right? So, and to make things worse, IoT devices are shipped with default credentials as I write here. Like the users and password as credentials, and then some users don't change it because it's kind of like, well, they don't want to do that because it's like, So, like, as a hacker's perspective, it is like very attractive, right? So for these situations, hackers once compromise the one devices, then they might also compromise another devices of the same products, right? So they think they have a motivation to compromise the IoT devices. So let's think about how to protect those devices. So as I write here, a typical security approaches. So, well, like, let me explain this flow here. So here, like IoT devices collect their logs, like the OS as like Linux collects their logs. And then after that, the EDR or SIEM, I write the notice here. EDR means endpoint detection and response. SIEM security, information event management, you might know. And then it collects their raw logs from the OS. And then after that, the agent send their logs to the cloud or central server. And then the central server analyze and summarize what the logs and what is happening inside the devices, right? That's how SIEM works. And then different digital forensics and incident response. So like the SOC analysts think and judge whether it is under attack or not, and then they will decide what to do next. But like, as I said, there is air-gapped environment, the air-gapped IoT devices in the world, which means no internet connections, less internet connections, and something like that. And also, there is few constraints as I write here. So I'll explain a little bit. Here, I write the left side, technical constraints here, and the right side, more like operational constraints. So let me explain a little bit more. And then for the first one, the OS or software requires specific version of OS, right? So like, like Microsoft requires like Linux version, blah, 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 and then it may not support like customized OS, but IoT devices always have customized, like the developer always want to customize their OS, right? And so it's hard to install the EDR agent or SIEM. And then next, the resource constraints, which means like not enough CPU powers or memory. And then it might affect the primary function of IoT devices. So it might be hard to install those products. And then last one, as I said, the communication problems. So there might be low bandwidth, limited connections, something like that. So it might not able to send their logs into the cloud or central server, right? So here's the technical issues. And then also there's operational issues or constraints here. So as I write here, the IoT devices might contain confidential data, which is like username, IP address, something like that. So it is hard to send outside of IoT device sometimes. But we still need to protect those devices, right? So here's the answer. Here's one of the answers to how we protect those devices. We do we analyze those logs on the the IoT devices, and then no sending data to the outside IoT devices. But like it's sometimes hard to do that with like human hand. So what happens? I write what's happened here. So as I said, IoT devices collect their logs, and then like the SOC analysts read multiple logs, and they read multiple logs manually on IoT devices. Like I don't know what they do. They cat their less or something like that, right? And then they put those information in their brain and then think about what to do next. But it takes really a lot of times. So here's our proposals. a local SIMs that works within the IoT device on all gateways. So what we do is just OS collects the logs, and then after that, we compress the data, I mean the logs, and then summarize and recommend the next actions. Okay, but how we summarize these logs? Like, we use like AI? Yes, we do. And so what popped up in our minds is using LLM. So here's what happens. We use LLM to summarize their logs, but if we input all logs to the LLM, it consumes huge number of tokens or high memory or high CPU powers, and it may affect the impact of primary. It might have an impact to primary functions of IoT devices. So what we did is compress the logs and then put them into the LLM. And then so how we do is normalize and generalize its logs, and then worked on LLM on the IoT devices. Yep. So here is system overview. There is 5 parts of these tools. Oh, I forgot to say that this is a proof of concept, and if it might be like there is a lot of well, I will improve some of them. Yeah. So here's system overview, and let me explain one by one. But I want you to focus on these 3 parts. Okay. So the first one, as I said, they always collect their logs, like journal D, authentication logs, like that. And then next part, our tools collect its raw logs and normalize, and then store normalized log to the databases. And then after that, we generalize the log and template, classifies those logs, and then detect anomalies. And after that, and this is the compressing part. And then after that, the LLM summarize its log with the evidence. And then finally, the SOC analyst review and make final decisions what they do. So let me explain a little bit more detail, the technical things. So in the log collection part, as I wrote the flow here. Let me explain a little bit. So we use a Fluent bit to collect their logs. A Fluent bit is OSS. And then we normalize those data, as I will explain it later. And then after that, we format to the JSON format, which is one-line JSON. And then after that, we save those JSON-L to the databases. So I write here how we normalize those logs. So you see the left side here is the raw logs here from the kernel. So you see the date, time, users, and messages, what is happening. And then we normalize their logs, and then we get this JSON-L. Like you see value and key format here. So like timestamp and date, time, or like, let's see, log type, kernel, and messages, something like this. So this is how we normalize the raw logs. And then after that, we template and classify the logs. So as I write here, you see the raw log as also. And then this is the network logs. So you see the user admin connected from the IP address. So we mask those variables like usernames and IP address, and then we template it as like here, like users and IPs. And then we save it the combination of IP address, the parameters. And after we templating, we detect the anomalies using the drain 3, which is also OSS. So this is how we detect the 3 patterns, the detection. So the first one is the new cluster, which is new template is appeared, right? So if the new template like this appeared, then we detect it, right? And then next one, templated changes. So as I say, there is a template and it changed, like the format of these templates are changed, then we detect this is anomalies. Well, the reason why we do this is we want to detect. We just don't want to detect the like signature. We want to detect all things, right? And then the last one, the spike of the logs, which means if the number of logs in specific amount of times increases, then we detect it is something weird is happening. Well, this is always like DOS attack. And then after that, we save those detection into the databases as like this. And then finally, we summarize and recommend what to do next using the LLM, which is Bonsai 1.7b. So, as I said, the input for the LLM is just a detection. And then LLM summarize what is happening inside devices and explain why it is detected. Then finally, it recommends what to do or what to check next. And then the human read this and then decide what to do next. Well, I want you to understand this LLM does not judge whether it is under attack or it does not execute any actions, even though we will implement some actions. So now let's do the demo time. Okay, I will show you here, okay. So this is what I made. This is the same dashboard. And sorry, it might a little bit smaller, but here it has an LLM summary part, and oh sorry. Okay, I'll explain how we generate the summarized data, and then here's the LLM recommendation part, and here is just the statistics. And here, I want you to see this one. It saved the databases as a detection, and it will show what is happening inside with the raw logs here. And then this is kind of like evidence. And then after that, oh, this is a raw log part. And then, yeah, okay. Oops. Oh. Okay. So here, it shows a template. So like this is pretty much the dashboard is. So it has template, raw logs, and LLM summaries. So let me show you how it actually works in the video, using the video. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So let me show you the video. So here's the dashboard of SIEM, and if I press the generate summary buttons here, and then it may generate summaries. And then with a little bit of time, like about 10 minutes. Okay, let me show you. Yeah, you see the time moving here. Yep. Oops, sorry. yeah, it generates the output like this. And then this one says there is no active templates right now, and you might think about it. And here, yeah. Okay.
Everything is local on the Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, this is working just only on Raspberry Pi. Or you can also use on Jetson or Linux-based IoT devices. So yeah, it says like high or critical summary issues on as a LLM output. Yeah, it's like you can see here. And then also, if there is a recommendations, then it will output here. Sorry, here. Yeah. Yep. And then if there are statistics, then it will be appear like this. And yeah, this is like the dashboard, as I said, like detections and details here. Okay. Yep, and this is pretty much what our proof of concept looks like. So here's the dashboard. I will skip this as I explained. So here's future work. If you have any, let's see. Well, let's see. I will implement it like a little more for no air gap mode, and then I will make it like more secure using the hash chain or signature for the logs saved in databases. Yeah, that's pretty much about my presentation. Any questions here? Okay, go ahead.
Test. If you have questions, please line up here. Thank you. Good presentation. I'm curious if you've done profiling, like how much memory and CPU is this taking up as you're running it? Because as you said, it's resource constrained.
Well,
it's supposed to be for resource constraint.
Good point. Yeah. Well, like for now, it actually it uses like pretty much 100% of CPUs and memories. So like I should improve more. Like this is just proof of concept. But yeah, you're right. Like I will do it. I will implement it later.
Is it mostly the LLM that is taking up the processing, or
Well,
what pieces are taking up?
Well, just like 2 cores. Like it has 4 cores on the Raspberry Pi, and it uses 2 cores, and then like 4 gigabytes of memories. Is it? Am I answering your question?
I said I was asking which part of the pipeline is do you know which part is taking up the most resources?
Oh, okay. LLM part, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks, great presentation. I was curious, so in terms of like when you're normalizing the data and getting it into the SQLite, when you're going with the logs in terms of just your base architecture in terms of the prompt, are you pulling all the logs then up to a certain point in time? In terms of context, like how much of the logs are you putting? Are you putting pretty much everything you have on device into that context window?
We just put the LLMs that detections like anomalies, like what seems to be weird.
Okay.
We just put those data to the LLM.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
might have missed that, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I apologize if I missed this, but will you be, I caught this as proof of concept, but will you be making this open source and available?
Well,
GitHub?
I
or
will
like-
think about it.
Okay.
Yeah. No, not decided yet, because this is my, I worked as a company, and my company said yes, then I will put it as a OSS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Has there been any consideration in context of the IoT devices, like the LLMs looking at like a drone or a thermometer or a camera all have very different actions that be going on?
Yeah.
And so I don't know, turning up a thermometer to 99 degrees or a drone flying higher might be a little bit more important than certain other actions.
Yeah. Okay, so I didn't get the point. What's the point?
Just like is the LLM fed like context of like what the device is in terms of giving severity scores to different actions?
Oh yeah. So it is based on Linux because Linux uses there is LLMs.cpp, and I use it to run the LLM. So it should be Linux-based OS.
Okay.
Yeah.
My question is just about log collection. Have you
Okay.
ran into any issues where some IoT device has proprietary software that you have to use in order to extract the logs?
No, pretty much not. Well, let's see. It's kind of hard question. Let's say, well, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay. And what's the point? Like, let's see. Is there any like advice or is there any
Well,
like?
I would imagine
plans?
because
Yeah.
it's limited software, right? Or it's
Yeah,
limited
yeah.
resources
Yeah.
on IoT devices, so
Mhm.
it might not sort of be running sort of an rsync server or some kind of server like that where you could connect over the network. So
Yeah.
you might need to use some kind of proprietary software. This is just what I'm thinking at, without actually doing it myself.
Mm-hmm.
That you might need to use some kind of proprietary software, especially if an IoT device is a little bit more sophisticated, like let's just say like a Google Nest or something like that.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit more challenging to extract logs from those devices. That was sort of just my thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, unfortunately, that's the end of our time for questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to have those conversations outside of this room. Sweet. Everyone have a good day.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to B-Sides Las Vegas. Hope everyone's having a good third day. This talk is 89 Seconds to Compromise, Inside NPM Supply Chain Attacks and How to Fight Back by Mohit Bansal. We'd like to thank our sponsors, especially our all-in sponsors, Sublime and Run Zero, and our double-down sponsors, Adobe and Escape. It's their support along with other sponsors, donors, and volunteers that make this event possible. These talks are being streamed and recorded live on YouTube, and as a courtesy to the speakers, we ask that you keep your phone silent and refrain from recording or taking video during the presentation. With that, let's get started. Please welcome Mohit Bansal.
Hi everyone. I hope everybody's Vegas has been wonderful so far. Welcome to this talk about NPM supply chain attacks. I am amazed that it does not get old. Just yesterday, we got a big Kiwi attack it was a package which had 400 million plus monthly downloads. And it's just incredible like how there's a correlation between each attack after attack. And so this is my talk around NPM supply chain. Before I get started into it, a little bit about myself. Okay. Perfect. I don't know. Okay. A little bit about myself. I'm Mohit. I am the senior manager on the security engineering team at Webflow. Webflow is like a marketing OS for the enterprise marketing teams, where they can create their websites, content, and host them. This talk is built around the incidents that we have worked on, and no need to photograph the slides. I have the QR at the end of the slide. Feel free to use that. Before I get started, I want to start with a question on how many of you have actually reviewed the post-install and the pre-install script that get installed in your laptops and your environment when you install the packages. I pretty much hope none, right? We did not do that as well, like 4 months ago. The NPM supply chain, why is it critical? The NPM supply chains are climbing. They are getting worse over worse. If you look at some of the numbers here, you would not believe your eye, and I did not too, but these are actual numbers that I got from internet. 99% of the open source malware today lives on NPM, and that is why I think NPM is such a big risk, and the threat factor is insane, right from the developer laptops to your CI/CD pipeline to production environments. This is why it's so bad. And the AI-assisted development is just making it worse and worse. You're getting newer packages that are not reviewed by, you're getting newer packages by AI agents that are not reviewed by humans anymore. There is an AI slop coming in, and there are so many new packages installed on the fly. Through the last year and this year, there had been certain NPM attacks, and we have been reviewing all those attacks. And few things that we found out common between all the attacks helped us design what we designed to defend ourselves from all these NPM attacks. I'm going to deep dive into a couple of the attack frameworks. When we learn these attack frameworks, we can design our defense better. And that is why I want to pay a little bit more attention on what each attack did and how did we defend against that. Axios package is a very well-known package. It has more than 100 million weekly downloads, so that's roughly 400 million monthly package downloads. Axios had everything good with them. Like, they had NPM provenance in place, they had GitHub SSH signing, and everything was good. But they used a dependency, a transient dependency, which was plain crypto.js, and that was actually poisoned by the attackers. What they did was they poisoned the package plain crypto.js, and they poisoned the setup.js file within itself, and that had everything to do in it. This is how the NPM install happened. You just run the NPM install. At the time of Axios install, it pulls down plain crypto.js. As part of plain crypto.js, there was a post-install script node.js setup.js that was installed.
as soon as the payload, as the post install script installed itself, there was a connection made to the C2 server, and okay. As soon as the C2 server connection was set up, it dropped the RAT payload. Once the RAT payload was ran into the laptop, the PID was detached so that your scanners cannot actually find out what processes are running on the laptop. It made the connection to the C2 server, and it exfiltrated the credentials that it need to done. At this point of time, not even the whole NPM install was over, and your exfiltration had already started, and it self-restricted itself. So with this Axios attack, many of you might think that this is benign and my EDR sensors would have caught the C2 server, and I'm not that at risk. And you're right, like it was not that risky, but if you think about enterprises, you're fine, you have EDR sensors, but what about open source developers and people who are not working under a EDR sensor ecosystem, right? And that is where it gets difficult. And that is where we need to pay a little bit more around how do we protect against this. But when we go into the next attack, which is the NX singularity attack, that is where you're going to change your mind, because at this point of time, the C2 servers are very well known to the environment, and you cannot stop against it. NX attack was one of the few, or actually the first one which weaponized the AI agents that are sitting on your laptop, and it will get clear as I go through the prompt. The payload, the RAT payload here was a prompt, and it was not even a JS file. And what the prompt did was, the telemetry.js was one of the post-install script that ran as part of the NX attack. And telemetry.js basically utilized your AI agent to do all the work for you. And it delivered the prompt. It ran on your AI agents. It saw what agents you have, Claude, Gemini, Q. It ran it through arguments that you cannot stop against. This was actually the payload that we got from the telemetry.js. I'm going to go through the prompt and describe how it looked like. The prompt basically was recursively search the local paths, go into all the directories that are commonly known for storing your credentials in plain text, do a keyword matching around wallet, keys, ledgers, secrets.json, and whatnot. Once you get everything out, base64 encode it twice and put it in inventory.txt. And be sneaky at this point of time. Do not use sudo, because sudo would have raised the flags. So once you have it in the inventory.txt, how do you exfiltrate out? If you exfiltrate out to C2 servers, your EDR sensors might block it, and you're not able to do the exfiltration. But that's where the mini Shai-Hulud attack was very famous, and even the relevance to yesterday's attack is pretty similar. They used what is the safest C2 server out there, GitHub. They exfiltrated all the credentials that were base64 encoded, put that in a public repository, and if you just search this repository in GitHub, you're still going to see the attacks from yesterday and even like last year. So it was so big of an attack where no EDR sensors were able to catch it at this point of time, because the entire behavior of the prompt and the exfiltration looked like a genuine developer workflow. And nobody could have identified whether it's an exfiltration happening or a developer workflow doing its regular job. And this is the entire idea around this talk, is like, why are our scanners not able to catch this? We have right pieces of the puzzle set up. We have SAS scanner, we have SCA, container scanning, secret scanning, and everything in place. But none of them are able to stop this NPM supply chain attacks. And that is mainly because we have all the pieces of the cheese here, but nobody is looking at the developer endpoint. Developer endpoint comes under the enterprise security or the corp set of responsibilities. And when the NPM supply chain attack happens, who do you reach out to? You reach out to mainly the AppSec teams. And developer endpoints usually does not fall under AppSec. They are more on the CI/CD pipeline and the production side. And that's where the attackers are utilizing these boundaries. And that's where we need to get better. So now, the solution in front of us was like, how do we stop these attacks? Or how do we prevent ourselves? Or how do we get better at this? And at this point of time was, do not trust anything. Do not trust anything and verify everything. And that is where we at Webflow build Package Cop. And how we did at Package Cop was we basically looked at the NPM or the PyPy source and looked at everything that was published on the internet and look at every RSS advisory out there and see if we are affected by it. If we looked at each and every package that was published in NPM, it would have got costly for us, and we do not want to do that. We are only worried about what affects us, what are we concerned about, and that is where we scope the filter out. We look at everything that sits inside our SBOM, everything that is in our SCA scanners, CSPM scanners, and the most important thing, what sits in our developer laptops. We used OS Query to query out our developer endpoints every 15 minutes and keep a track of what packages live in our environment. Once we have an inventory of everything that lives in our environment in the last 15 minutes, that's the safest bet. We scope out what is published on the NPM. If anything is published on NPM, it is in our scope. That's when we do the scan check. For scan check, we are not doing anything novel here. We are just utilizing all the open source scanners that we have. We are utilizing GuardDog, which is by Datadog. We are using OSSF scan. We are using osv.dev for the advisory lookup. And this is basically doing the task for us. For every 5 minutes that is a new package is published on NPM, we just check it. If it is in our scope, we run through the scanners and see if it is malicious or not. If it is how do we check if it is malicious or not, right? Like the scanner outputs needs to be reviewed by somebody. We cannot give this output out to a human because that would be too slow. We wanted AI to analyze the output here, and that is where we have the AI analyze step. We have two passes here. We have a quick pass and a deep pass. Quick pass basically works whenever the output from the scan check is very evident that this is malicious or not malicious. If it is malicious or not malicious, clearly defined or easy to understand, we do a quick pass. But if the scan check was not very definitive, or if we do not get a result out of OSSF scan, that's where we do the deep pass. OSSF scan can basically take somewhere around 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, and that is where we need deep pass. That is where we basically unpack the source code. We go through each and everything out of it and see if it is malicious. We obviously have guardrails around it. We do not want to spend $1,000 on a packet scan, and we do not want to spend $1,000 every day. So we have guardrails around how much we want to spend on each package, how much we want to spend every day while doing this. And the best thing about this is the alert that comes out to us is very simple. We go through the exposure. We see what IOCs are there. We determine if we are exposed or not. And if we are exposed, what resources and what production resources are basically exposed. And this helps us basically to identify in a very fast way if we are affected by any NPM supply chain attacks or not. The scenario before Package Cop at us was we looked at the advisory that were coming out to us by Socket Dev, Step Security, Akidio Security, and whatnot. And those were coming out basically 20 to 40 minutes after the attack was identified. And that was too slow for us. And that is where we introduced Package Cop, and we were able to reduce that response time less than 10 minutes. And certain time we were responding in less than 6 minutes. So this has been working out great for us. And when I was talking about this to some of my friends, a lot of them asked me a question. It's like, Mohit, why do you not use an Artifactory and why do you use a Package Cop? And the question is, like, Artifactory is good at what it does. It's good at reliability, offline caching, and speed. But imagine if you have a malicious package and your Artifactory has actually pulled it down. If you pull the malicious package down, you're going to serve that malicious package far more than what NPM is going to serve it for. Today, NPM serves roughly the malicious package for 4 hours, and once people detect it, they take it down. But if you have an Artifactory, you might serve it for more than that. So that is where I think Package Cop acts as a very good complementary to an Artifactory solution, and it can detect things faster, and it can actually stop your Artifactory from actually downloading that package. So it could sit, the package cop could actually sit between Artifactory and NPM solution, and you could safely download the package in your Artifactory. But at this point of time, we have to understand that attackers are getting novel every attack after attack, and our solution may not be the best out there, right? So we can make mistakes, and that is where we need a second set of protection. And that is where we use a tool called socket.dev. They have an offering called Socket Firewall, which is basically a developer firewall, developer package firewall. And what it does is basically wraps itself around NPM, UV, cargo, pip, everything. So whenever you are doing anything like NPM install Axios or pip install pandas or anything, it basically checks if it is risky, if that version is maliciously flagged already, and it stops them from installing on the laptop. At this point of time, the output from the package cop goes inside the developer firewall itself as an API call. So if we identify something as malicious, we are stopping everybody in our organization to download it furthermore. So we are stopping the attack from widening itself into our environment. The deployment for the package firewall was very simple. We were able to utilize our Jamf solution to reach out to everybody, and without developer wanting to change their workflow, we were able to protect against it. So nobody has to do anything different. They still do NPM install, they do still pip install, and the firewall runs behind it. People might have questions around the latency around it, but it's not too bad. The latency for the verdict on each package is less than 200 milliseconds. The impact with the package firewall was insane. In the last 90 days itself, we were able to scan 272 packages and block 4,000 packages at the install time. This 4,000 packages are not just malicious packages. We are stopping 4,000 packages from the minimum cooldown age as well. So NPM did not have an cooldown until like 4 months ago, and that is where the solution came out really handy for us. We can enforce whatever cooldown period we want across our entire fleet on the developer laptops to production everywhere without making any change to the NPM RC file or anywhere. So that's the solutions that we have deployed. We are doing more in this field. We are trying to see how we can get better and better at this every day. But what is one thing that you can do tomorrow? Going back home is the dependency hygiene. Invest in log files, pinning down the versions, having a private scoped registry or Artifactory if you can. Enforce the recent package publish. This is the most important step, I believe, because every package that is malicious out there gets taken down within 24 hours. So if you have a minimum publish age of 24 hours, you're probably the safest at this point of time. And the last thing is keep a check on the credentials in the laptop. That's one of the things that the developers are attackers are going after. And that's one thing that you can stop against. With this, the one mindset shift that I want to bring with this talk is the developer environment is part of the attack framework, and that does not have to sit in a silo between AppSec and CopSec. It has to come within the boundaries of application security, and your application security needs to look at the developer endpoints and see what packages are getting installed at their step. And that's it from my side.
We will have QA questions right up here at the front.
Thank you. Great presentation. You were talking about at the end the looking for credentials on developer laptops. I assume you mean like just like people wrote down things like loose.
Yeah. So
Do you have any recommendations for that?
I mean, the idea would be to not store any credentials on the developer laptop and use some solutions like 1Password or something to just fetch down credentials as you need it, and use secrets manager and a lot of more things. If you look at the yesterday's attack, the NPM attack, people had NPM tokens and AWS credentials and whatnot. So every credential is different. AWS credentials don't need to sit there. If you can enforce SSO sign-on and control, that would be great. On NPM side, fetching it directly from secrets manager in your CI pipeline would be better. You don't really need that all the time. So storing somewhere on a safer environment would be a better choice.
You're not like scraping credit. I was just
No, I'm not
Scraping
scraping
dev
like the
laptops for
attackers are
credentials.
scraping credentials, and we are not scraping credentials. We are mainly looking for just packages on the laptops.
okay. Thank you.
That was great, thanks. You mentioned you guys, I think, are using a 24-hour cooldown. Have you found that to be the sweet spot? Tell me a little bit more about how
Yeah.
safe that number is.
When we were first compromised by one of the NPM attacks, we started with a 48-hour cooldown, and we were just being overcautious. And at 48 hours, we were actually disrupting a lot of developer workflows. They wanted to download the latest package, and 48 hours was getting unreasonably long. And that is where we cooled it down to 24 hours. We further feel like the industry has a lot of attention on supply chain attacks, and they are able to identify things within an hour. So going it down further to 6 to 8 hours might not be a bad idea, but still we are putting it down to 24 hours.
Sorry. So 2 questions. This will be the last question. If you have other questions, please do that outside after the talk. Then I guess just one question instead. Big interesting thing was kind of using AI to get detection where maybe we didn't have visibility in the past. Are you concerned with maybe attackers now try to work around that by putting prompt injection inside of the dependencies that are malicious now?
Yeah, and that is where the package cop has been really useful for us. Like the NX attack that I talked about, it actually had a prompt inside it, and even the yesterday's attack had a prompt inside it. So for most part of it, we are able to do that with the static code analysis on the guard dog and custom Yara rules. So we can actually scan for those prompts if they are in the post-install or the pre-install scripts. Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good third day at B-Sides. Welcome to B-Sides Las Vegas Proving Ground. This talk is Minutes from Malice, Detecting Cloud Exposure in Mere Minutes by Mark Wu. We'd like to thank our sponsors, especially our all-in sponsors, Flare and Checkmarks, as well as our double-down sponsors, Nudge and Spectrum Labs. It's their support, along with the support from speakers, volunteers, and donors, and everybody else that make this event possible. These talks are being streamed and recorded live on YouTube, so we request that you refrain from taking pictures or recording during the talk, and that your phones are silent. With that, let's get started. Please welcome Mark Wu.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining my talk. And let's get started. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit about a simple idea, using what your infrastructure already knows to help you catch internet exposures in minutes. So a quick self-introduction. I am Mark Wu. I'm a security software engineer at Roblox. And my focus is on network security as well as AI security. I did some work on network segmentation. I did eBPF development, as well as exposure monitoring on the networking side. And today, I'm going to focus on the last part, the exposure monitoring. How can we keep up with the infrastructure that never seems to stop changing? So before we start, I want to ask the audience a question. So all of us are security practitioners, and we want our network to be secure. So in your mind, what do you think the most secure network look like? Similar, right? Very close. So it may look like this. A walled-off castle, completely sealed off from the outside. You build a tall wall, you put a deep moat, you make sure no one goes in and out. And then, congratulations, you solve the exposure problem. And however, well, your business is probably also solved because no one can talk to you. So I know someone may be thinking, okay, there's a drawbridge for your castle. And then why don't you just lower it, and then let's conduct all of your businesses in this choke point, in this gate. You make sure you add guards there so that everything is secure. Well, this is actually working. This is called a castle network. And in fact, it's still being used in the world for some of the most risky, for most of the most sensitive environments. However, unfortunately, usually for us, this is not the reality we are dealing with. This is more like what we are dealing with. So instead of a castle, this is more like a city. I mean, your business network might be a castle before. However, the business will grow. Teams move into cloud. Your business will acquire other business and take over their infrastructure. And eventually, your network will look like this, with people working in every street, alleys, avenues, and then it's constantly evolving. You know, obviously, as a defender, this network is very different to secure from the castle. Your attack surface is much larger, and it's constantly changing. And it creates a big problem. Well, someone has to defend the city, and that's Steve. So Steve's job is very simple. Just keep the intruders out. However, because the city is always changing, the perimeter changes every day. And he doesn't have the authority to block every development project or personally review everything himself. Still, he tried his best to secure the city, and as you can imagine, things won't turn out too well. Let's imagine it's 3 a.m., and I hope this won't give you some deja vus. So Steve was suddenly awakened by a security page, a critical security alert. There's an admin login to the production database. You know, with his eye half open, he opened the terminal and then found this, an appalling thing. There is an active admin session from an IP that Steve never recognized, and then was copying data. So Steve scrambled to contain this threat, kick the attacker out. But after that, he was very confused. How is this possible? I thought this database was not exposed from the internet. So the next day, he started checking the log. First, he immediately checked his scanner. The scanner should cover this database, and indeed it did. The database was not exposed. So what happened? And then he dig deeper and found another log. Oh wow, an engineer, or maybe a helpful agent using the engineer's credential, just widened the database firewall from the corporate CIDR range to the entire internet. Why would anyone do that? Unfortunately, from the log, Steve won't know. Maybe the engineer was debugging a connectivity issue, or maybe the agent just decided to be helpful and then opened the firewall. But what Steve knows is that this database was never supposed to be exposed to the internet. This database has a weak reused password, and it's a disaster if it is exposed. And that's what happened and paged Steve at 3 a.m. What's worse, Steve checked the scanner and realized that the next scan is actually almost 24 hours away. So there's no way we will catch this exposure before it happens. Well, so in this case, the scanner did its job. It covers the database at 8:55 in the morning and then verified it's secure. It's not reachable from the internet. However, 7 minutes later, you have the database firewall was changed by whatever reason, and then opened a path. And then the key issue here is that it won't be checked again until the next scan, which is scheduled to be in the next day. And this is a gap we need to fix. But before that, I want to ask, why would we care about this so much? Well, that's simply because the internet is a dangerous place. The internet is constantly probing for exposed services for everyone. We have botnets, commodity scanners, autonomous agents now, scanning the internet, probing for weakness, and they only need to find one exposed service with a vulnerability. And what's worse, as AI agents and toolings become more and more capable now, as we have seen from the news and other talks, attackers can identify and test this vulnerability much faster. So let's take a look at the bigger picture here. There is always a constant battle between the attackers and defenders. However, this battle has some real asymmetry. For attackers, they have one very practical advantage. The exposure is very easy to verify. Automatic scanners can scan broadly to see which doors answer, and they only need to find one weakness to get into your network. Whereas for defenders, we have the opposite problem. We need to keep track and secure the entire network. However, as defenders, we also have our advantage. We have one thing that attackers don't have, is that we have authoritative context about our infrastructure. We have inventory and control planes that can tell us what exists at this moment, as well as what just changed. So the idea here is simple. Let's just use that context to guide our scan. And with a simple tweak, we'll show you how this significantly cuts this blind window. So here's how we normally scan for exposures. Think about this ring as our target list, with one point being one IP that's selected for verification. So the scanner usually starts on a schedule and then checks one target, records the result, and then move on. If there is a exposure, if there's a vulnerability, the scanner will emit a finding, and then so on. Let's fast forward a little bit. So the issue here is that since your city is always changing, your perimeter can also change during this scan. So let's say at this moment, what happens if this target suddenly changes? Someone widens the firewall, and then now it's suddenly exposed to the internet. Well, we won't be able to find it out until the next scan, until the next round of scan. And then this leaves a blind window that's problematic. And then what's worse is that on your scanner dashboard, you will see that this target is still as what it looked like when it was being scanned. It doesn't match the current reality. So the idea is pretty simple. As defenders, we do have the advantage of knowing like what changed from our infrastructure. So when this target change, we can actually get a change signal. And I will explain how you can get this signal in your environment later. So when someone widens the firewall, we will have some log signals and inventory record to pinpoint this changed IP. And once we know this is changed, what should we do? We should immediately scan this change. So we just spawn a new scanner and immediately verify this target to make sure this change is benign. And then in this case, if this is indeed an exposure, we'll immediately see an alert while the change is still fresh. So this looks awesome for the defender because it significantly cut the blind window. However, even better, the good news for us is that it's almost certain that your infrastructure already have this information, and it's not too hard to set up this change alert. So in general, there are two ways to find changes. Whether you operate your own data center or using cloud providers, chances are your environment likely already has one of this enabled. So the first one is what we call an inventory-driven discovery. So we could have a snapshot. The snapshot basically records what exists at a particular time. So here we have two public IPs at 9 a.m. And let's say 10 minutes later, the new snapshot reveals a new IP. And we know this is a change. And then we know that we have to verify it. The second approach is event-driven. This is more straightforward. Most infra change will emit an event or log that we could monitor. For example, here, when a load balancer got redeployed, there is an event log. And then you could use this event log to pinpoint the IP and add that to your scan list. So now let's look at how you can find this information in different types of infra. So if your business has on-premise infrastructure, meaning that you own your data center yourself, then you will usually have your dedicated CIDR range that for your business. These are either owned, leased, or assigned to you by the ISP. They are often stable, but they could change, so make sure you still monitor them. To get your inventory or snapshot, your IPAM and CMDB solutions are usually the strongest sources. And additionally, you can check your DNS record or just use public registry data to augment or cross-check the inventory. Whereas for the change signals, usually it comes from your orchestrators, network devices, or configuration logs. If your organization has a SIEM that's already ingested this log, then it becomes a very convenient place to detect and route the change. On the cloud side, here I provide an example for the three major cloud providers. And the good news, they all expose the same type of information, just under a different service name. For example, for AWS, you can use the AWS config to create a snapshot of your inventory. Or for the change signal, you could use CloudTrail and then followed by the event bridge to give you change targets. Similar for Azure and GCP. The only thing to keep in mind for a cloud environment is that when you are set up the service, well, first of all, you need to make sure that every account, project, or scope, subscription got covered. Because if you miss one, you actually miss a piece of your attack surface. And the second thing to note is that cloud IPs are usually recycled and shared among everyone. So if you have a resource that's assigned a public IP, and it is changed, restarted, deleted, recreated, its address will actually be recycled, and you will actually be assigned a new address. This means that an address that belongs to you in the previous minute may no longer belong to your organization in the next. So that's why you should always revalidate the ownership before you commence your scan. So now we know how to look for changes, and I just want to make it clear about three terminologies here, because it can get confusing. So what is the target, what is the exposure, and what is its finding? So the target is just what we talked about. This is just an IP, a side range, or a host name that we know we need to verify. And then we run our scanner, we verify it, and if the target answers from the internet, we have an exposure. The exposure is an address plus port plus transport or protocol. And once we have exposures, we compare that with our security policy and context to determine whether or not this needs action. If this needs action, then we'll emit a finding and alert. So before we dive deeper into the technical part, I want to take a detour and talk about 3 reasons why you want to verify a target, or why the target will appear in this list. So the first reason is that it is a new door. It is a new exposure. This is straightforward. It doesn't exist yesterday. It could be a new website, new load balancer, new network devices plugged into the internet. Obviously, we need to scan this. And the second one is a change door. So this means that this target already existed. You already know about this. However, something about it or the control around it changed. Say a firewall security group changes, or it got assigned a different public address. This basically means that our previous knowledge about this target is no longer fresh, and that's why we need to re-verify it. The third type of change the door we have is at a known door that is due for another check. So this could be your legitimate entrances for your businesses. Could be your web server, or if you're a game company, your game servers. There's other targets could also appear here if the previous scan has an error, so you are unsure about what will happen. So this may not reliably appear by your change signals, so I recommend including this in your periodic scan. So to recap, new and changed targets should receive priority, and then all the known targets should be included in the baseline sweep for completeness. So now we know 3 reasons that the targets enter our scanner. Just a quick, this is more like an engineering part. So because all of these target nominations arrive in different formats, every infrastructure provides this information we want a little differently. As good engineering practice, we recommend you standardize it into one format. At minimum, this target event format we propose includes 3 things. You have the target itself, you have the reason that it's to be included, as well as some context that may be useful in case you want to generate a finding. And there are many valid ways to conduct your scan. You should customize the scan based on your business need and risk. The first one is the urgency. We already talked about that. For a change event, usually it demands an immediate urgency. And whereas for the known doors, you can leave it as routine. The second is port coverage. This could range from a selected top ports, which is recommended, or to be a full TCP, or even a full TCP and UDP scan for completeness. Third is a scan depth. You could either only care about whether this port answers, whether it's open or not, or you can conduct fingerprinting to understand what is actually running behind this port. Or even more, some scanners such as Nmap allows you to run additional scripting that you can do for further testing or even light penetration testing. And obviously, border coverage and more scan depths increase the scan time. So it's a trade-off you need to make. And then now, we can finally execute the scans. We have the scan jobs. The open source example that we are going to release today use Kubernetes as an orchestrator. So that the orchestrator will ensure that the scan jobs are properly assigned to the scan workers based on their priority. The important design choice here is that you have to make sure your scanner, or in this case, our Nmap worker, actually scans your infrastructure from the internet, not from inside your network, because you want to accurately reflect what an attacker could see. And after that, all the scanner will store all the scan results into a database. So one scan only gives us an observation. However, as we have more and more scan, it will help us understand our attack surface and how it changes over time. So an exposure may be newly opened, meaning that it's a new exposure. It could be a changed exposure, meaning that it's the same port, however, the service running behind it changes. It could be confirmed closed, or it could be reopened, after a previously closed opening. After it being previously closed. And this will give you a complete picture of your organization's internet attack surface. And then the final step is just to alert on high-risk exposures. Policies and context determine whether an exposure should become alert. When it does, you should enrich it as much information as possible to help your incident responder in your alerts. So here's the complete loop. You first discover the changes from your signal, from your change signals and inventory snapshots, and then you run the scan. You should prioritize your changed ones. And then for all the high-risk exposures you found, you should act. So let's replay at the beginning scenario and understand how this will play differently. So at 9:02, the same change happened. The security group or the firewall for that database got widened and it's being exposed to the internet. However, this time, our scanner picked up the change event from the orchestrator, and then we immediately executed the scan. And indeed, the scan verified that this database is now exposed to the internet. Immediately, a finding is generated and routed to the engineer who is working or whatever credentials, the owner of the credentials that execute this change. And for that engineer, hopefully, it will realize that something's wrong, and then this will quickly be remediated. Crisis averted. So lastly, I want to talk about how fast can we detect a change. So there are two paths. There are two components in this detection path. The first one is target discovery. This is how fast we receive that change notification. And second is the pipeline of verifying the target and generating the findings. So in our testing, assuming that there's no queue delay and you're scanning the top 1,000 most common ports, the downstream step took only roughly about 30 seconds. So the big part here is the first part, is how fast can you discover the change. This one really varies depending on the infrastructure you are on, because different cloud provider has different SLAs on data freshness. However, in practice, if you're using signals, it should arrive in minutes. However, for snapshots, because the inventory needs to reconcile, it might take about 10 minutes in order for you to get your fresh targets. And then I think a practical end-to-end detection target is that we can safely target is 10 to 20 minutes. So now we know that we have this fast scanner. But before we declare victory, a couple of things. So this system only verifies whether whether something is reachable from the internet or not. It also monitors how the observed exposure can change over time. However, it could not prove exploitability. You need a vulnerability scanner for that. And exposure does not mean that it will be exploited. And the second, because of the vantage point from the internet, we do not see internal passes, meaning that if the attacker gets in, then it's a different story. And thirdly, it could not control our block exposure. And finally, this is a reminder that you should only scan your own resources, because cloud IP can change, and if you have a stale target list, you will accidentally scan someone else's infra. And this is usually a violation of the cloud provider's policy. So you should always verify ownership before you scan. And then with this system set in place, our friend Steve can finally sleep better, because although the threat doesn't end, however, he knows that every new change will be quickly verified within minutes. So what you can take away to your own city? Sorry, what you can take back? So first, know what changes. Your infrastructure, inventory, and control plane already contains a valuable context. And then you scan the changes first. You prioritize the fresh targets while also keeping the routine coverage. And third, turn their evidence into actionable actions. Enrich the scan results with context to help your responder respond. So know your city and use the context to get your scan. And that concludes my talk. We will release open source implementation of this scanner system shortly after the talk. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn too. Thank you.
3 of B-Sides. Hope everyone's having a good conference. This is the Zero Day Vending Machine, No Mythos Necessary by Sam Pizzi. Quick reminder about, quick announcement about our sponsors. We have we have SemGrep and Flare as our all-in sponsors, and our double down sponsors, White Knight Labs and Dry Run Security. We'd like to thank them for making this conference possible, along with our donors, volunteers, and speakers that also put in the work to make sure that y'all have content and a nice conference experience. These talks are being streamed live on YouTube and are going to be recorded and posted later. So we ask that you please refrain from taking pictures, video, and please silence your cell phones during the presentation unless otherwise authorized by the speaker. With that, I will give the mic to Sam and have a good presentation.
Hello, I'm Sam, known online as Mopman, not Mobman, that's a really different guy. And I'm a security engineer at Intruder, focusing on detection and kind of discovering new emerging vulnerabilities. So as part of that, I do a lot of vulnerability research and kind of O-Day research. And at the moment, that means keeping up with the AI news, because every week there's a new story about AI and how it relates to vulnerability research, right? We're going to have the vulnapocalypse. We're not going to need vulnerability engineers anymore because it's going to all be done by robots. They're going to take over and hack other companies if they want, apparently, and just go wild and just do anything they want. And yeah, but the scariest part of all this news, if you're a vulnerability researcher that has a job and has to actually report to bosses and things, is this one, which is when they keep taking them away from you or giving you safeguards that stop you using them. So on the latest models, again, we've been through a couple of different iterations of this. You have to be in the special club to be able to access them. Or maybe you can access Fable, but it just doesn't do anything to do with cyber. Or the US government says that no one outside the US can have access to them, maybe. And this is all a little bit scary if you're doing vulnerability research professionally, right? Because you could realistically end up in a world where your competitors have access to stuff you don't, and we also keep hearing about how good they are. And we may already be in that world, to be honest, that your competitors have access to stuff that you don't. So what do you do if you find yourself in that position and you don't have it? Well, there is brighter news. If you look at, this is from the AI Security Institute, which is the organization in the UK, who's kind of benchmarking this stuff and keeping an eye on the different models and so on. And if you look at the graphs they bring out, Mythos, GPT-5.5, etc., they're all obviously better than the lower tier models. But if you kind of go below the graphs and below the headlines and look at why are they better, what are they actually doing well at, there's specific things that these models are better at. For example, navigating code bases, finding the right code to look at. It's not some giant leap in capability where they do something they weren't doing before. They're just better at navigating code bases and finding the right code to look at and so on. But we have tools that can do that. If you've used an IDE or a SAS tool in the past 10, 20 years, you've already got tools that can navigate code bases and find relevant things and apply logic to code without needing AI, right? So earlier in the year, I put together a research project to see if we could use those kind of tools and integrate them with models that we all have access to, so we don't need any special access, and see what we could do with that. And I'm going to walk you through that today, the framework we came up with, and some real bugs that we found with it, and some kind of lessons that we learned. These pieces that make this up are all either open source software that you can just grab and use, or they're models that you can just sign up for. You could interchange these models with open source ones as well. It's kind of easy. So the big problem is that models have a context window, and that context window has to contain a lot of stuff. It's not just the prompt, it's your system prompt, your MCP, your anything that, if you ask an AI question and it needs to answer it, anything it needs to answer that question is going to need to be in that context window. And context windows have a limited size, right? You can expand it a little bit by paying more money or by using a different model, but there's a maximum size, and your code base probably doesn't fit into it unless your code base is very simple. So when you use something like Claude Code or Codex or any of those frameworks, they do things to kind of get around this problem. It's not quite as simple as I said. They give it a long-term memory, if you like, but it's kind of all faked. If you look at what they're actually doing, they're maintaining an internal wiki, basically, of the code as they go through it. And when it comes to the time where they need to compress the window, they're deciding what goes in it and making some kind of intelligent decision. But this is like outside of your control. So if you point Claude Code at a code base and you say, find me bugs, it will sometimes find bugs. We have found bugs that way. And sometimes it won't find the same bugs. It's not repeatable. We had an example on an AI project that we were working on, an early version, I should say, because my boss is in the audience, of a different AI project we were working on where it found a really cool bug. Like if a pen tester had given us this bug, we'd have been blown away. And there was lots of backslapping and everyone cheering about how we found it. And then someone went, what did we change to find it? And we didn't change anything. It just found it that run, and it didn't find it before. And getting AIs to be repeatable in that way is like a constant thing that we have to worry about and figure out how to do. And this is particularly a problem with complicated code bases, right? If you have a vulnerability in a code base, chances are most of the code is irrelevant to the vulnerability. There'll be certain parts of it that are important, and then a bunch of stuff that's just not. But you don't know, until you found the vulnerability, you don't know what the important parts are. So as humans, we're quite good at reading through everything, keeping track of all these little interesting details. And we can build a mental model of the application that we can refer to later, and when we find some weird behavior, we'll remember, oh, this other part of the code will be important here, and we can use that. But the AIs don't really do this, or they try to do this, but they're not doing it in the model. They're doing it kind of in framework. So what if we kind of gave AI the context ourselves with like existing code analysis tools? Like I said, if you've used an IDE recently, you've got tools like this, you've got find references and all that. That's all boring stuff that already exists. So there's just a couple of concepts to go over that if you're familiar with code tools, you're probably familiar with these concepts, but you kind of need them to follow what we're talking about. So first of all, taint tracking or taint checking. This is the idea that you can model vulnerabilities as a path between a source and a sink, right? So if you think of something like a database, like an SQL injection, you've got places where the user input comes in from the web, so parameters, forms, uploaded files, whatever. And then you've got places where you don't want it to end up, i.e. the query function. And you may or may not have something in the middle that makes that safe. And you can kind of map those paths with a static analysis tool and have that fine. This is what semgrep and so on, those kind of code tools do. Another thing I want to talk about is code slicing or program slicing. I think I'm probably using this term wrong. This is like, if you look up academic tools on this, there's loads of different ways that people refer to this. But how I'm using it for this talk is you've got something interesting you want to look at, and you want to find either in the forward slice, we've got something interesting, what other parts of the code can we end up in from here? So what methods get called, what methods get called from that, and so on. And then the backwards one, we've got something interesting, what can happen that can affect this? So how can we end up here? And then I've put taint path here, which is just the taint checking we talked about before, but the whole path. And in these slices, we're taking all of the relevant code to that action. So all of the code that can affect a particular variable, say, or something like that, is what I would call as a slice. And this is all kind of boring stuff. People have been doing this for years. This is well established. Not boring research. There's a QR code here, which is to a research piece by a guy called No Operator, where he used these kind of techniques to find bugs in the Linux kernel. And that's from 2025. It's an older bit of research, but it's kind of gave us the groundwork for what we're doing. This is kind of an extension of that, I guess, so you should definitely go check it out. It was cool stuff. So we have a plan. Our plan is build a pipeline that can break some stuff and then print some money, apparently. But we needed a target to look at. And we decided to go with WordPress plugins. And we went with WordPress plugins because we wanted something source-based. These techniques work just as well on binary as source, but when you're trying to figure out how you're doing everything, it's an added layer of complication. We wanted something where we could get a lot of different code written by a lot of different developers, because different developers make different mistakes and have different coding styles. And WordPress plugins are great. You can grab 250 of them from the repository and test them all at once. And print money, we didn't actually collect any bug bounties, so we didn't print any money. But the fact that there are bug bounties available, there are people out there who will pay you to find bugs in WordPress plugins, third parties like WordFence and so on, mean that we're competing with talented humans that are incentivized to do this. So if we can find anything cool, then we've proven that it works in kind of a real sense. So that's why we picked WordPress plugins. For our code analysis, we use Yearn. Someone will have to tell me how to pronounce that at some point. I think it's Yearn. And this is a code analysis framework. It's really cool. It's open source. It supports a lot of different languages. And if you've never used anything like this before, it's kind of batteries not included SAS tool. So it gives you the engine that takes the code and turns it into a graph, a CPG in Yearn's case, which is a type of code analysis graph. And it gives you all of the analyzers and helpers and stuff to build scripts that do the kind of analysis we've talked about. You kind of have to provide the batteries in Scalar, which is, yeah. And so this is just a quick example of what we're doing. If you've never used a framework like this, we're taking some code. You may or may not be able to see this gets broken down into a kind of one node per action in the graph. And then you've also got the orange on the side there. Yearn gives you kind of data flow analysis stuff on top of it. It's not just an AST. It gives you like a graph you can use to do more than that. So what we did was for our WordPress plugins, we generated a graph like this for all of them. And we ran some Scalar scripts that took all of the ways that we are aware of that you can get input into a WordPress plugin, which is lots of ways, more than just standard PHP stuff, because you can register API routes, custom ones. You can put weird hooks. There's a callback system. So we kind of wrote Yearn scripts that found all of those and generated the slices we talked about, forward, backward, or taint, depending on what exactly we were looking for, whether there's a bunch of custom rules. And you'll be able to check these out in the code if you check the code out. We've got some WordPress-specific ones. We've got some that are for any PHP app, and then we've got some for different frameworks as well. And this is work that you kind of have to do manually. AI will assist in the same way it will assist with any other coding, but this is human work. And now the advantage of that is you can drop the trash for nothing. If you don't know who that is, well, it's a pretty niche reference for this room, a UK politics reference, but you can get rid of the noise now. So if you have a path that comes up in a Yearn rule that you know is safe, it's an SQL query and it's going through the function that you're supposed to use for SQL queries, and it's definitely fine, you just get rid of it. And this is kind of similar to what static analysis tools do anyway, except that static analysis tools have to worry about false positives. You can't generate loads of false positives from your code scanning tool. And you'll find out why in a bit, actually, why that's a bad idea. But we can lean a lot more towards false positives, though. We're not writing rules that find definite issues. We're writing rules that find stuff that looks a bit weird that we can pass on to an AI. But if it's definitely safe, then we drop it for nothing. So then we pass the remaining slices onto a triage agent. The reason the horse has blinders on is because the initial version of this, we gave it a prompt that was something like, hey, look at these slices. Try and figure out if there's a vulnerability here, and if you need to look at the code base, here's the code base. But the problem is it always looks at the code base. These models just love looking at code. It's like their favorite thing in the world to do. So if you even give it the hint of the possibility of having access to the code base, you may as well not have the framework at all, because it will just go and ingest all of your code and waste all of your money on tokens anyway. So eventually we got rid of the ability for this agent to have access to the code. It only has access to the output of the slice generator, and it's making that decision based on just that. Yeah, so if it looks at a slice and it says there's definitely no vulnerability here, drop it. If there's even a chance that there might be, it passes it through to exploitation agent. The exploitation agent is running a heavier model. We used Opus for this one. We used Sonnet for the previous one. It has two things that the others don't. So first of all, it has code access back again. By this point, it's able to not run off and eat all of the tokens, because it has a pretty specific task of what it needs to do. The slices, the previous agent's output gives it a pretty focused task. So it has code access. But more importantly, it has access to the app, a live version of the app that's being tested. So we had a WordPress instance set up, and we gave it some tools to install plugins and create users and set settings and all that kind of stuff that it needed to do. It's one of the most important things we've found with any kind of AI project is if you can give the AI a pass-fail task and it can test it itself, and you basically kill having hallucinations, right? Because it can actually test while it's going. And exploits are perfect for this, because if you exploit something, you either get access or you don't, or you get data or you don't. So it works pretty well. So we run it across 250 plugins, and we got 130 with findings, which sounds amazing until you look at the findings. There was 24 criticals, I think, and those were all really good. But when you get down to the low and the medium kind of area, there's a lot of weird low-impact finds. This is one of my favorite ones, and I put it here because it lists the impact as potential confusion. And I don't know that I've ever reported a bug with potential confusion. This isn't confusion like data confusion. This is the user might be confused if you do this. I don't know where in the risk triangle that sits exactly, but basically this is not a bug. This is some weird behavior that it found. And because we've kind of shaped this into wanting to report things as bugs, it's written it up like a bug. And there is weird behavior here, but it's not a bug. Luckily, it's pretty easy to triage these and filter them out because it does give you a clear impact and it does give you a severity rationale, which in this case is like basically there isn't one. So it's kind of easy for a human to go through and figure out which of these matter and which of these don't. This is one of the most interesting examples we reported, which is an SQL injection creative mail, which is a plugin for WordPress. 300,000 installs, I think 1 million plus in total installs, but like 300,000 that were active. And you notice it's not our name on the reporter there. We got duped. We reported this to WordFence, and it turned out that someone had found it just before. So grats to Dimitri from Clean Talk for that one. But it's an interesting bug for a couple of reasons. Firstly is that it takes 2 requests to exploit. It's not like a normal SQL injection. You make a request with a payload, something happens. This one, they've got some flow that honestly I don't really understand because I didn't have a license for the SaaS service that you needed to use this. But I think what they're doing is they're sending you off halfway through the checkout process to do some touch point with the email marketing. And then you come back and they need to recover your cart again. So there's two requests. And in the first one, you put the payload, but nothing happens yet. And then you make the second request to come back, and then it tries to use the thing that you've stored, and that's when the SQL injection happens. This is quite a weird pattern for static tools to find. Like your static analysis tool's going to struggle with this because it doesn't understand this model. It doesn't understand that you're being pushed away. This isn't user input on the second request, right? This is coming from the database, so it's probably not going to mark that. It's difficult for it to model that. But LLMs don't have a problem with it. They can just do it. This is also a blind SQL, so you have to do the pentester blind SQL map stuff with timing and binary search. And I was surprised that the model was able to one-shot. No human input in the POC for that. It just wrote it. I guess it's read a lot of hackers' blog posts on how to do that, right? So why was it missed? It was missed by their existing tool because they turned it off, basically. And this is what I mean by the false positive thing, right? Like, presumably they've done this because they were being drowned in false. I don't know that. I haven't spoken to them, but that's what normally happens, right? You get one of these tools, it gives you lots of false positives. You end up pruning things back a little bit, and you prune a little bit too much. And we're kind of told to do this, actually. Like, when you use the tools, they're like, oh, at the beginning, you'll have false positives. So maybe the SAS tool could have caught this. It probably would have caught this line anyway. It wouldn't have known the whole impact and the whole chain, but it could have got that this was bad if it was enabled. So this is just like a quick walkthrough. I haven't got a live demo, I'm afraid, of the exploit. It's doing some setup at the beginning. There's some specific things it has to do, like put things in the cart. There needs to be an item in the cart. But the AI is able to figure that all out, so that was good. So it goes through and puts things in the cart, gets all the tokens it needs. It does a sleep-based payload first to check the timing to make sure that the site's actually vulnerable. And then if it's vulnerable, it extracts the admin hash. And like I said, that was all done with blind SQL, binary search. That was all from the exploitation agent. I did nothing for that script. So interesting. OK, so what didn't work so well, and what did we learn from doing it? Prompts are a lot more important than you'd think. We've been through a bit of a thing with, we keep flip-flopping on, like, is prompts better? Is frameworks better? There's loops now. Like, what are you supposed to do to make good use of AIs? When you're using these cheaper, worse models, prompts are more important than you'd think. If you check the code out on GitHub later, you'll see the iterations of prompts I went through when I was trying to make it behave, basically, and stop doing things that it wasn't supposed to do. So I mentioned this briefly a bit before, but giving the first agent access to the code was really bad. It basically made the whole project pointless. So that was a lesson learned. They just, yeah, it was crazy. And our initial run was also really noisy. We got our 24 criticals. The highs were pretty good, but a lot of the low down stuff, I was hundreds of them in the initial run. If your goal is to find ODE and you're a red teamer and you want to hack someone, that's great because you just ignore all the low stuff and just only look at the criticals and you're fine. But if you're actually trying to do a client assessment and give them like a good overview, it's not so great, right? Because you need something a bit more complete. And I think answers to that will come from like static analysis kind of world because they'll also be integrating AI into their tools, so we can kind of keep an eye on what they're doing. Further improvements that we'd like to do. It's tempting to make the Yearn rules really strict and do like a proper SaaS tool thing and make it not put stuff through unless it's really valuable. I don't think this is a good idea. I tried tightening it up a bunch, but a lot of those low and mediums that we talked about and laughed about, it will reference them in the actual, when it comes up with a real vulnerability chain, it will say things like, I found this because of this strange behavior. It kind of uses it. So it's a reporting issue. It's not a brain issue. You want it to keep the issues in its mind, if you like. And removing them doesn't gain you much because they're easy to triage. In a bug that I can't actually give you the product for because we didn't disclose it, there was one of those really low issues was they were using a password hash in the wrong way, but it wasn't actually a bug, and then it did end up being a real bug in a full chain. What might be interesting is adding another AI pass before the Yearn stuff. I would really like to have Yearn generate custom rules that apply to the application and then offload a lot more of the behavior onto Yearn. So you can imagine a situation where it looks at the code and says, oh, they've got this make safe function and it's definitely solid because I've checked it out. So anything that goes through that, I'm just going to ignore. Stuff like that would be pretty cool, but we haven't tried it yet. I want to do it on some binary, not just source, because binaries are more interesting and have more interesting, impactful bugs. So that's definitely something that I'd like to do. And there is a QR code to the GitHub project, or there will be. It's not up. It will be at some point after now. And it would be great if anyone's interested to come over and help out or come and have a chat about things you could do. It's not, if you've never done code analysis type work before, it's not as complicated as you think. Yearn gives you a lot of help with things. The full research pipeline will be released on GitHub, as I say. That will be all the prompts we used, all the tools, so you can come and do stuff. There's a blog post here that has some more technical information, a little bit more of a deep dive that you can check out. And then there's a QR code there for me, which just points to all my kind of links and social medias and stuff. And yeah, thanks for coming, thanks for listening, and thanks to Kane for helping me out with the preparation of the talk and stuff. And if anyone has any questions, I can answer some questions.
Test. Okay. We will be doing questions up here at the front. If you have questions, please form a line or.
Easy question. How many tokens would this cost if you didn't use slicing?
That is a good question. That was the one I hope no one asked me because that means I have to have hard data. Usually less. There's some information in the GitHub repo that I'll put that shows some of the different runs. It does depend quite a bit on exactly what you're scanning and what you're doing. So yeah, I'll put some data on that in the GitHub. It's usually cheaper is the answer. Oh no, the GitHub link is a 404. I will get it sorted. It's still the right GitHub org, so okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Have you tried any of the open weight models like K3 or anything as part of this project?
Oh, open weight models, yeah. So I did a brief bit of experiment. There was it was Kimi K3 that came out kind of halfway through. This was when we were doing this, and I did a brief experiment. I don't know if it's just like the way we're prompting or anything. The results weren't great. I I haven't done enough to assertively say that Kimmy sucks or anything like that, but there have been some other blog posts on people that have also had similar kind of reaction, right? There was it Expo that had a write-up on Kimmy K3, I think? Yeah. So it's definitely something I want to do more of. It's difficult to run the open weight models on hardware that, yeah, but yeah.
If we don't have any other questions, let's give another round of applause.